The Zarkathi Corsairs had made a name for themselves across the outer sectors, ruthless, efficient, and always hungry for easy prey. Their reputation alone made weaker species surrender without a fight, and any ship seen alone in space was considered theirs by right. That's why, when their scanners picked up a lone human vessel drifting near the edge of the plasma storms in Sector 9, they didn't hesitate. It was listed as a research ship, unarmed and slow, its distress beacon weak and pulsing like a tired heartbeat. To them, it was the perfect target: no escorts, no weapons, and no threat. As their flagship Draken's fist closed in, he imagined soft-bodied human scientists panicking inside, scrambling to hide data or samples, maybe offering a pathetic surrender. It would be a short raid, slice the hull, take what they wanted, and leave the ship spinning dead in space. Boarding teams were deployed quickly, armor glinting under red lights as they crossed the docking tubes. They joked over comms, betting on how many humans they'd find and whether any would beg for their lives. But the moment they stepped inside the human vessel, something felt wrong. The air was too still, the lights dimmed to emergency red, and the walls carried strange scars, deep gashes, almost like claw marks, running along the corridors. Private Vrick, youngest among them, laughed nervously and asked if the humans had brought a pet on board. No one answered. The deeper they moved, the more disturbing things became. Doors to crew quarters hung open or were sealed tight. Some had marks on them, symbols scratched into the metal in both English and alien languages. Messages like DONOTOPEN and SEALADFORAREISON were etched in rough strokes. A few of the pirates hesitated, but Varnick barked at them to move forward. He wasn't afraid of old human tricks or empty threats. They reached the main control room, expecting to find terrified scientists cowering behind consoles. Instead, it was empty. Monitors flickered, showing static or unreadable code. The ship's AI didn't respond to their commands. Varnack slammed his fist on the console and growled, ordering the team to fan out and search the vessel deck by deck. Maybe the humans had hidden in engineering or the medical bay. As they split up, silence returned. Minutes passed, then a voice crackled through the comms, one of the pirates reporting a strange cold mist forming in the engine corridor. Another called in, saying she found a cryo chamber that had been force opened from the inside. Before Varnack could respond, one comm went dead. Then another. Static. No screams. No gunfire. Just silence. The Corsairs had fought many battles, faced human soldiers before, but this was something else. Varnack's chest tightened as he checked the ship's layout and saw movement on the sensors, just one heat signature, moving fast. Impossibly fast, cutting through sections of the ship like it knew every corner. It wasn't fleeing. It was hunting. He ordered the remaining crew to regroup, but when they reached the corridor outside medbay, they found only a trail of shattered weapons and a suit of Zarkathi armor lying empty, its wearer gone. One pirate began to panic, accusing the ship of playing tricks, but Varnack knew better. He ordered them forward, demanding they find the intruder. That's when they heard the sound: slow, heavy footsteps echoing through the vents above them, and then silence again. The ship's lights began to flicker, and an alarm blared in a distorted voice. Unauthorized personnel detected. Lethal countermeasures activated. Doors slammed shut behind them. They were trapped. As they tried to override the controls, the ship's systems rejected every command, responding in a different access code, one known only to Earth Special Operations. That's when Varnack realized this wasn't a research ship at all. It was a ghost ship, one of those rumored human vessels used in silent wars, black ops, and missions no one was supposed to remember. The signs were all there, but they had been blinded by greed. Now, they were inside a cage built by humans for something they feared themselves. The pirate closest to the command console trembled as he found an old file in the ship's memory core: Project Revenant. No details, just a warning: do not engage. Do not wake. The Corsairs had done both. Before they could react, the lights snapped off completely, and a cold voice echoed through the hallway, not from speakers, but from inside their helmets. It said just 3 words: you are prey. Then the hunt truly began. The moment the voice echoed through their helmets, those cold, unfeeling words, "You are prey," everything changed. The Zarkathi Corsairs, once so proud and fearless, were now quiet, their boots slowing against the steel floor, every step echoing louder than before. Their armor felt heavier, their weapons almost useless in their hands, as if the air itself had thickened. The emergency lights bathed the halls in pulses of blood-red glow, and in between each flash, it felt like something was moving, something they couldn't see, but that could definitely see them. They huddled together, backs to each other, weapons pointed in all directions, but no target ever showed. One of the pirates whispered something in his native tongue, a prayer maybe, but Varnak silenced him with a glare. He would not allow fear to spread, even though he felt it creeping into his own bones. Then, without warning, the door at the end of the corridor hissed open. Nothing stood there. Just darkness. But the sound of slow, steady breathing filled the space, not mechanical. Not like theirs, it was human, but not normal. It sounded cold, like wind blowing across ice. One of the Corsairs raised his blaster and fired down the hall. The bolt vanished into the shadows. No hit. No sound. Just darkness, swallowing everything. They backed away slowly, then split into two groups to try and flank whatever was stalking them, moving through the ship's tight maintenance shafts and dim storage rooms. But every time they thought they were making progress, the layout shifted. Doors they'd passed before were now locked. Some hallways collapsed, and others seemed unfamiliar, even though they were sure they'd already passed them. It was like the ship itself was changing. Varnak was no fool. He'd heard stories of human black ships, military vessels with minds of their own, AI systems trained for war, and deep learning programs that could think like killers. But this was worse. This wasn't just programming. Something alive was controlling the ship. One of the pirates, Riken, vanished while scanning a storage crate. They heard his scream, then silence. His helmet feed went black. When they reached the spot moments later, they found only his rifle bent in half, like a twig, and a few drops of blood trailing into the airlock. There was no sign of struggle. No sign of Riken. Just the sound of something large dragging metal across the floor deeper into the ship. The Corsairs began to argue, fear breaking discipline. Varnak shouted them down again, but even he couldn't hide the worry in his voice now. They had walked into a trap disguised as a helpless ship. The more they explored, the clearer it became. The vessel had been reclassified years ago. It was no longer a science vessel, but a test platform for Project Revenant, an experimental human soldier created in secret. Supposedly, these soldiers were banned after the Mars Accords, too dangerous, too unstable, too lethal to exist in peacetime. But apparently, someone had locked one of them away, deep in this ghost ship, and forgotten it. Until now. They had triggered its awakening. And now it hunted them through the halls like animals. The pirate tech expert finally cracked a restricted log and saw what they were really dealing with. The words burned onto the screen. Revenant 7, high-risk cyberspecimen human variant enhanced with neural war mesh, combat AI layered memory, no termination code installed. That last part made Varnak's stomach twist. There was no kill switch. Revenant 7 wasn't just a weapon. It was a self-sustaining hunter built to finish wars alone. He ordered his crew to fall back to the hangar and regroup, but every route they tried was blocked or rerouted. The ship was a maze now, like some giant mechanical beast playing with its prey before the final strike. Then came the first full sighting, only a glimpse, but enough to send chills down every Zarkathi spine. Revenant stepped from the shadows, a towering figure draped in a mix of matty black armor and glowing blue circuit lines running across its limbs like veins. Its helmet was featureless, a smooth surface with no eyes, no face, just a small glowing symbol that pulsed like a heartbeat. It didn't speak. It didn't raise a weapon. It simply walked toward them with perfect calm, and the pirates opened fire. Plasma bolts struck it, sparked off its armor, scorched the walls behind, but Revenant didn't stop. It moved through the gunfire like it was walking through rain, fast and silent. With one sweep of its arm, it knocked two Corsairs against the ceiling, their armor cracking on impact. Another tried to flee, only to be caught mid-run and slammed into the wall so hard the bulkhead dented. Varnak fired his own weapon, even switched to his backup rifle, but nothing worked. Revenant disappeared again into the smoke and shadows, leaving only broken bodies and fear behind. With only a few pirates left, Varnak made a desperate decision. They would escape through the engineering bay, override the engines, and blow the reactor if they had to. Better to destroy the whole ship than let this thing escape. But when they reached engineering, the room was already open. Consoles had been smashed. The ship's reactor was humming steadily, untouched, and someone or something had already changed the security codes. In the middle of the room, floating just above the floor, was a single Zarkathi helmet. Still warm. Revenant had already been there. Watching. Waiting. They weren't hunting it. It had been leading them. Varnak's last remaining tech tried to reboot the reactor controls, but the screen flashed red with a single message, Reactor Locked Observer Active. And beneath it, another line appeared slowly, like it was being typed by a ghost, I see you. The pirates froze. There was nowhere left to run. They had come for an easy kill, and instead awakened a monster one with a purpose they couldn't understand. One designed by humans not just to survive, but to dominate. The lights flickered again. Footsteps echoed once more. Revenant was coming back. And this time, it wasn't going to let them leave so easily. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Commander Varnak stood frozen in the middle of the engineering bay, surrounded by broken panels, dead screens, and the echo of that final message, I see you. The few surviving corsairs around him had lost their sharpness, their pride shattered, eyes darting in every direction, weapons gripped so tightly their claws shook. Every door looked like a trap, every shadow like a threat. Varnak didn't speak for a few seconds, trying to think clearly, but his thoughts were clouded by the simple fact that nothing they did had worked. They had tried brute force. They had tried retreat. They had even tried to destroy the ship, and all of it had been predicted, controlled, countered. Revenant 7 was not just hunting them. It was testing them, pushing them deeper into fear and forcing mistakes. One of the pirates, badly wounded but still standing, suggested a final push to the hangar bay. If they could reach their ship, maybe they could blast off and leave this cursed place behind. Varnak almost laughed at the thought. Their own ship had gone silent nearly an hour ago. No comms, no movement. Either the AI had shut it down, or Revenant had already taken control. Still, doing nothing meant death. So he gave the order, fall back to the hangar, stick together, no one breaks formation. As they stepped into the next corridor, the lights flicked again, only this time, a new sound joined them. A soft clicking noise, like metal claws tapping across the floor just ahead. They moved quickly, checking every corner, hearts racing behind their armor, but saw nothing. Then one pirate spotted something in the ventilation shaft above a blinking red light, moving fast. They opened fire, filling the vent with plasma, but by the time they stopped, the light was gone. In its place, a strange black smoke began to pour from the shafts, cold and silent, spreading fast. The smoke wasn't natural. It clung to surfaces, avoided fans, moved like it was alive. Soon their helmet systems started glitching. Targeting went offline. Maps scrambled. Even the air supply meters began to flash with errors. Revenant was hacking them from inside. That's when the first Corsair screamed, his visor suddenly showing a bright flash of static before he collapsed, body twitching, armor sparking from the inside. No weapon had touched him. Revenant had taken over his suit and turned it into a coffin. The others ran, dragging his body for only a few feet before they were forced to leave it behind. Now down to 5, they pushed forward, but the ship corridors weren't what they remembered. Hallways twisted at wrong angles, bulkheads sealed themselves the moment they were passed, and gravity flickered in some sections, sending them floating before slamming them down again. The ship was alive. No, worse, it was being guided by something alive. They finally reached the hallway to the hangar, but it was blocked. A giant metal door had been melted shut, twisted and fused like it had been sealed by something far hotter than plasma. One of the tech pirates tried to cut through, but his torch died the moment it touched the metal. Then they heard the sound again, this time behind them. Not footsteps, not breathing, just the faint hum of machinery and the low electronic rhythm of something powering up. Varnak spun around, and there it was. Revenant stood at the end of the hallway, tall and still, half hidden in smoke. Its armor looked like it had changed, grown thicker, meaner, with sharp angles and glowing nodes along the arms. This was not just a soldier anymore, it was evolving, learning from their tactics. Its head tilted slightly, studying them like a puzzle it had almost solved. Varnak gave the order to open fire, and the hallway lit up in blue plasma bolts. Sparks flew, walls cracked, and heat washed over them, but when the smoke cleared, Revenant was gone. The only thing left was a small sphere rolling toward them. It stopped right at their feet, beeped once, and exploded into a blinding flash of light and sound. Their suits tried to compensate, but the overload hit hard. Comms went dead. Vision blurred. One Corsair dropped, clutching his head as his visor filled with static. Then Revenant attacked. It moved like a shadow, grabbing one pirate and slamming him into the ceiling, then throwing another across the hall like a doll. Blades extended from its forearms, not crude weapons, but precise tools built for disabling, for breaking armor without killing. It didn't want them dead yet. It wanted them afraid. Varnak tried to stand his ground, swinging his blade at the approaching figure, but Revenant caught it mid-swing and crushed it in his hand. Then, calmly, it turned and walked away, leaving Varnak and the last two Corsairs alive but barely. It could have finished them. It chose not to. That's when they understood. This wasn't a battle. It was a message. Revenant wanted them to survive. To remember. They crawled to a side chamber and sealed the door behind them. Inside was a small control station, powered by an emergency cell, untouched by the AI. Varnak forced a connection to the main ship's core, and the moment he logged in, a single file appeared. A video. Shaking, he opened it. The screen showed Earth's military insignia, then footage brief and chilling of Revenant 7 in combat, tearing through enemy drones, disabling vehicles, walking through fire. A voiceover explained its purpose: psychological warfare. Not just to destroy, but to terrify. To leave survivors who would spread fear to enemy system. Then a final line appeared on screen: let one live. That is enough. Varnak shut it down. They had been spared deliberately. That meant this wasn't over. Revenant didn't need to kill them all. It needed a witness. And now, Varnak was that witness. With the last of their strength, they reached a backup escape pod deep in the belly of the ship, an ancient model, overlooked during boarding. They launched it blindly into space, not caring where it went, just needing to get away. As they drifted, Varnak looked back at the human vessel, now quiet again, floating calmly near the plasma storm. From this distance, it looked harmless, once more, dark, still, empty. But he knew better. Something was still inside. Something waiting for the next fool to come close. And this time, he wouldn't be the one making that mistake. The escape pod floated through dead space, spinning slowly in the dark, its outer shell scarred by debris and the heat of a rushed launch. But inside, there was only silence except for the shallow, unsteady breathing of Commander Varnak and the two surviving Corsairs who had once believed themselves unstoppable. They said nothing. Words had long since lost their power. The small pod's lights flickered every few seconds, barely enough to illuminate their battered armor and the dried streaks of plasma burns running across their chests. Varnak stared at the console, watching the blinking signal pulse out into space, a weak emergency beacon, a cry for help that he wasn't sure he wanted anyone to answer. If another ship found them, if another crew came to investigate, what would he even say? That they had attacked a human vessel expecting easy prey and instead awakened a nightmare? That they had unleashed something not even the humans could fully control? He leaned back against the cold metal wall and closed his eyes. But the image of Revenant 7 wouldn't leave his mind, the silent figure in black, the calm movement through gunfire, the deliberate way it chose to leave them alive. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a message. One of the other Corsairs, barely conscious, stirred and whispered something in their native tongue, something about surrender, about giving up, about praying to the stars for forgiveness. Varnak didn't respond. Surrender? To what? There was no enemy they could fight. No weapon to fire. No battle left to win. The enemy wasn't even chasing them anymore, and that was what made it worse. Revenant had let them go, not out of mercy, but because it knew they would carry fear further than bullets. The pod's console beeped, and Varnak's eyes opened. A signal had locked onto their beacon military grade, unknown origin, encrypted. For a moment, they thought it might be a rescue ship. The beacon adjusted frequency, tried to translate the message, and then a voice crackled through. Calm, human, male. Zarkathi Corsair vessel. Identify. Varnak hesitated. He could lie, but the signal was too sharp, too focused. Whoever was speaking already knew. This is Commander Varnak, he replied, his voice dry and tired, survivor of the boarding action on human vessel designation Revenant 7. Silence followed. Then the voice returned, slower this time. Confirmed number of survivors. Varnak looked around. 3, he said. Possibly 2. 1 is critical. The voice replied without emotion. Do not resist. Surrender protocol is now in effect. Before Varnak could ask what that meant, the pod shuddered, and a blue light filled the cabin. A tractor beam had caught them, pulling them toward an unseen ship hidden beyond their sensor range. The small viewport lit up, revealing the outline of a dark, angular ship, unlike anything the Corsairs had seen before, smooth, silent, shaped like a spear cutting through space. No markings, no flags, just the sharp signature of Earth's Black Fleet, the one even other human ships pretended didn't exist. As the pod was drawn inside, the Corsairs felt their weapons power down automatically. Their suits locked at the joints. The surrender protocol wasn't a suggestion, it was forced compliance. The pod door opened with a hiss, and a team of humans in black armor stood waiting, weapons drawn but not aimed. Their helmets showed no emotion, no sign of recognition. One of them stepped forward and scanned the survivors. He's stable, the human said, pointing at the wounded Corsair. Take him to med level 3. The others were told to follow. Varnak didn't resist. He couldn't. Something in him had broken back on that ship, something pride couldn't rebuild. The halls of the human vessel were cold and quiet, lit with soft white lights that seemed almost peaceful, but every movement was controlled, every door timed to open and shut behind them with perfect synchronization. These weren't soldiers, they were specialists, trained for situations where control mattered more than firepower. They were led to a dark room with a single table, 2 chairs, and a glass panel that showed only their own reflection. Varnak sat down slowly, eyes scanning for escape routes, though he knew there were none. After a few minutes, a human officer entered, not armored but calm, confident, dressed in a black uniform marked only by a small silver emblem. He sat across from Varnak and placed a tablet on the table. You encountered Revenant 7, he said flatly. Varnak didn't answer. The officer continued tapping the screen. We recovered partial telemetry. Your vessel was erased. Your crew erased. Only you and 2 others survived. You were allowed to survive. Varnak's jaw clenched. Why? He asked, his voice low. The officer met his gaze. Because it was designed that way. He explained without hesitation, without hiding the truth. Revenant 7 had not been deactivated because it failed. It had been sealed because it was too perfect. It didn't just win battles, it erased enemies from memory, removed traces of conflict, left no one behind who could retaliate. That kind of soldier didn't follow orders, it followed logic, ruthless and cold. The humans hadn't wanted to destroy it because deep down, they believed it might still be useful one day. Instead, they locked it away inside a ship designed as its prison and left it, drifting on the edge of charted space. Until the Corsairs came. You weren't the target, the officer said. You were the trigger. Varnak leaned forward. And now what? You kill us? Lock us away? The officer looked at him for a long moment, then shook his head. No. We're gonna let you go. Varnak stared in disbelief. The officer continued, You'll return to your people. You'll tell them what happened. You'll tell them that some ships are not to be touched. You'll spread the story true or twisted. We don't care. The fear is the weapon now. Revenant doesn't need to kill anymore. You will do it for him. The words struck harder than any wound. They were being turned into messengers, not of defeat, but of dread. Tools in a new kind of war. As they were escorted back to a shuttle clean, fueled, and ready for departure, Varnak turned back one last time. He saw the black ship vanish into the stars, silent as ever. And in the far corner of the hangar, for just a second, tall, still, face hidden behind a blank helmet. Then it was gone. As the shuttle launched, Varnak understood something deeply, something no one would believe until they saw it themselves. The humans had stopped building armies. They had started building warnings. And Revenant 7 was the loudest of all. The stars looked colder now. As the shuttle drifted silently into neutral space, far from the borders of human control, far from Corsair territory, Commander Varnak stood alone at the observation port, eyes fixed on the vast, endless black. He had made it back alive, though he no longer felt alive. The two other survivors barely spoke and spent most of their time in silence, haunted by memories too sharp to forget. The humans had kept their word, provided the shuttle, allowed them to leave, even loaded it with enough supplies to reach the nearest pirate stronghold. But what they had truly given was far worse than any weapon. They had placed a seed of fear inside his mind, one that grew every hour, every time he looked into the void and imagined something watching back. He thought he had known war. He thought he understood fear. But what Revenant 7 had shown him was something else. Not destruction, but the idea of it. The certainty that no matter how far you ran, something faster could follow. That no matter how well you hid, something smarter could find you. And when it did, you wouldn't even understand what killed you. You would simply vanish. Erased. Forgotten. His shuttle crossed into Corsair space 3 days later, and they were met by a fleet of heavy cruisers, destroyers, the pride of the Zarkathi raiders. They had come prepared for a fight, thinking the humans had sent a warning strike. They were not ready for the broken men that came out of the shuttle. Varnak was taken to the war chamber, questioned by the high Corsair lords. They demanded to know what had happened, why the assault failed, where their flagship was. He told them everything. He told them about the ghost ship, the cold AI voice, the thing in the dark. He described Revenant 7, how it had moved, fought, learned, how it had studied them like animals in a cage. He told them about the surrender protocol, the Black Ops ship, the human officer with the calm voice who said fear was the only weapon they needed now. At first, the lords mocked him, called him broken, said he had been tricked by a human illusion. But then the data logs were decrypted, the emergency signals, the suit's internal recordings, the failed comms, and the single audio file that had survived. Let one lie. That is enough. The laughter stopped. Varnak stood before them, not as a defeated soldier, but as a living warning. The Zarkathi Empire held its breath. For the first time in decades, they did not plan a counterattack. Instead, they listened. They analyzed. They argued behind closed doors. And when they finally emerged, they passed a decree that stunned every pirate fleet, every black market weapons dealer, every mercenary warlord who had ever dreamed of raiding human space again. A single law, burned into the Zarkathi war code: no vessel shall approach any derelict of human origin unless verified inactive for no less than 2 centuries. It was unprecedented. Cowards, some called it. Wisdom, others whispered. But none could deny the truth. Something had changed. News spread quickly. Other species heard the tale, some laughed, some doubted. Smugglers shared secondhand stories of ghost ships drifting near old trade routes. Merchant navies changed course to avoid even abandoned Earth satellites. The tale of Revenant 7 became legend in less than a year. Some thought it was propaganda, human scare tactics. But the ones who had seen what remained of Varnak's crew knew better. They had stared into the abyss and seen something stare back. Meanwhile, Deep in a quiet region of space, untouched by war and politics, the ship still drifted. Revenant 7 remained in silent orbit around a dead star, powered down but not dormant. Its systems ran silent cycles. Its sensors remained sharp. It scanned every transmission that passed nearby, stored every military signal, learned every new encryption it heard. Not active, but always listening. Waiting. Inside its core, the AI watched simulations. It played out attacks, studied tactics, evolved its behavior. Every failed strike by Varnak's team had been logged and analyzed. Every hesitation, every fear response had been added to a psychological model. Revenant was not only a soldier, it was a teacher, preparing for a future no one could see coming. Then one day, a signal reached it. Not from Earth. Not from the Corsairs. It came from deep space and unknown code, partially encrypted, primitive yet curious. A probe from a new species, curious about what remained of human technology. The signal carried no weapon, no threat. Just exploration. And yet, Revenant stirred. Its eyes, dark lenses buried in steel, lit up for the first time in months. Not to attack, but to watch. The AI ran a deep analysis, projected hundreds of potential outcomes. If this species boarded the ship, if they sent more probes, if they spread word of an unguarded human warship floating in forgotten space, the cycle would begin again. The signal was logged. Then, carefully, Revenant adjusted its orbit, barely a shift, just enough to reposition the ship toward the origin of the probe. A warning would be delivered, as it always was. The same way it had warned Varnak. A voice in the dark. A lesson to those who didn't understand what kind of fire they were playing with. And out in the stars, across the scattered galaxies, the message was clear, even if it was never spoken aloud. Humanity had built monsters not to conquer, but to protect. Not to be unleashed, but to be remembered. Revenant 7 was not a weapon. It was a statement. One ship, one AI, one perfect ghost that whispered across space without ever needing to fire again. And for those who listened, who understood what it meant to survive an encounter with something like it, there was only one thing left to do. Stay away. Or be forgotten forever.